privilege to represent my hometown. You know, my family still lives there. My brother's captain of the Cottage Grove Fire Department. Everybody but my father in my family graduated from Park High School. So, you know, I'm tried and true Cottage Grove, born and raised, and the area is just such a treasure. The people are amazing, and it is just an honor to be up here in the Minnesota Senate representing Senate District 54. You know, I was a state representative for 4 years, and I was very proud of that as well, representing much of the same district that I am here in the Senate, but I just don't recognize it anymore. It is toxic, it is very, very partisan, and it is purposefully injected, and that has to change. Case in point, I just was aghast when they threw a 1,000-page omnibus bill filled with multiple subjects of policy. I mean, everything from agriculture to workforce development and everything in between. It was everything in the kitchen sink thrown into this bill and expected us to vote on it in a matter of an hour plus. That is not how this is done. It is not how our founding fathers expected it to be. You know, you got to just get back to the basics up here. Let's have single subject matter bills, vote them up and down, and let the governor make their decision. So after day one, we started up here. The first thing that actually occurred was the settlement from 3M pollution in our area that directly affected the East Metro and directly affected multiple communities in Senate District 54. So right off the bat, I got a bipartisan group of folks together to work on legislation to secure that money and segregate it out of the remediation fund so that it was used explicitly for the East Metro. And that allows for transparency and accountability so that we know where that money is going, because in the legislation that we proposed and ultimately was signed into law by the governor, it put in reporting so that the legislature knows where this money is going and we can report that back to the residents. It also puts on a website for folks that are on private wells, because this money shouldn't just be used for city water, it should be used for private wells as well. And so we have a process in place on the PCA website that will allow for residents to look up that process. You know, really it was an effort by a lot of different folks that got that across the finish line into the governor. And everybody deserves clean drinking water. It should not be a partisan issue. And so I'm glad that we're going to start the remediation, and it won't be at the expense of taxpayers. It will be at the expense of 3M, who did contaminate the water. So this is a bonding session. And so that was the main focus this year. And we did also have a surplus. So when it came to the bonding bill, I had multiple provisions in the bill that was signed into law as well. And the main part of this is making sure that our infrastructure is strong and that we're meeting the needs of our community. But this is about jobs. These will create a lot of local jobs for our workforce, and I'm very excited about that. It'll help our local economy. The first major provision that was in the bonding bill that I dropped into in the process was the Hero Center. And the Hero Center will be located in Cottage Grove, and it is used for public safety training. There's a lot of training requirements for our emergency responders, our police, our firefighters, and so it is imperative that they have a training space to complete that, and that will be what the Hero Center is, proudly housed in Cottage Grove, and it'll be used by a lot of the East Metro departments. So it's a collaborative regional significance for training for our public safety officers. The next one is the Smart Center, and that will be located in Inver Grove Heights in Dakota County, and I do represent Dakota County, parts of Dakota County, and that will be used for a lot of mental health triage and training for public safety again, focusing more on de-escalation for police officers for the residents. And again, another much needed training center for electronic crimes, which has been a high focus of Dakota County Sheriff's Office and the Dakota County Attorney. I also am proud that Seidel's Lake received just over $700,000 for water treatment upgrades for a water treatment pump, and so that stops flooding and eroding. And so very excited for South St. Paul there to be able to help them with some critical infrastructure needs. As a county commissioner, I worked a lot on our parks, our metro area parks, and I think it's a little known fact that most of the funding for our metro area parks, such as Ravine Park in the district and St. Croix Bluffs Park, comes from the bonding bill. And so we were able to secure $10 million for regional metro parks, and a portion of that will come to Washington and Dakota counties, which will be very helpful to keep up with our existing infrastructure in our parks that are so popular in our neighborhoods. Another big project, especially for counties, are wetland replacement funds. And what those are critical in infrastructure projects on roadways, because it's a requirement that counties replace any wetlands that were disrupted or removed. And that's a unfunded mandate if the state doesn't help with those projects. And so being able to provide necessary funding for counties to do those projects and replace wetlands is very important. I was very proud to be the chief author of that provision. There are many other worthy projects in that bonding bill. I won't highlight them, but there's going to be a lot of jobs and a lot of wonderful projects in local communities as a result of this bill. A couple other projects, consumer protection is a high priority for me, and it's very important to Minnesotans. And last year we had data breaches with Equifax and many of the other credit reporting companies. And one of the bills that was signed into law that we were able to work in a bipartisan manner on was making sure that constituents and Minnesotans don't pay to have their credit reports frozen or unfrozen, because it is the fault of the credit companies, not the residents, not the constituents. So they shouldn't have to pay for the mistake of the credit reporting companies. So now, as of January 1, you won't have to pay to freeze and unfreeze your credit reports. So very proud of that. One of the most important provisions that was passed and signed into law this year was the fact that post-traumatic stress syndrome will now be a condition of workers' compensation for emergency responders, such as firefighters, EMTs, and police officers. As the daughter and sister of a firefighter, we really need to help our heroes. What they see cannot be unseen. And they see some of the worst accidents and situations. And then especially paid on-call officers are expected to then go to a day job and act like nothing happened. And, we need to make sure that we're providing them the services in their time of need. And making sure that they're taken care of. And this bill does that. So I am so proud that we were able to get that passed and signed into law. So I was very disappointed what ended up happening with the opioid provision. It passed overwhelmingly here in the Senate and then went on to be dropped in the House. And that was a direct result of special interest in Big Pharma. And it's just such a disappointment, because it is an epidemic that is severely impacting our communities. That cost falls to taxpayers, and it shouldn't be. This should be the responsibility of the pharmaceutical companies to be part of a solution to a problem they knowingly caused. And I hope next year when we come back that one of the first things out the gate is that we help our communities in this. I could not be more proud of the bipartisan efforts here in the Senate between Senator Chris Eaton and Senator Julie Rosen on making sure that we hold them responsible, because the pharmaceutical companies should be held responsible. One of the most surprising disappointments of the session was the fact that nothing occurred with distracted driving. It was probably one of the most emailed topics to me, and also most of the folks up here that spend a lot of time in front of the chambers talking to us, they were family members of people that had lost loved ones due to distracted driving. I am just befuddled that there was such bipartisan support of that, of making sure that we tighten up our laws on distracted driving. And it it didn't get across the finish line. And I'm hoping that next session that becomes a priority, because we should be able to work on and when we agree on a topic, we should be able to get it across the finish line into the end zone. And that just didn't happen, and that surprised me. It was probably the biggest surprise of session for me. You watch the stories that play out on the news, and you hear the stories from constituents that come to your office about the abuse of elderly folks in, assisted living or nursing homes. It's a problem, and it was one that should have been addressed very strongly and very aggressively, and it wasn't this session. The provision that ultimately got to the governor's desk and was vetoed, according to the advocates of the task force that the governor put together to look at this issue, made us worse off than our current situation. And so I was very confused at how that could not have passed as a single bill through the legislature and to the governor. So again, it's very important that right out of the gate next year that we address this issue and make sure that we are protecting our most vulnerable folks and our loved ones. Well, much like the 1,000-page omnibus bill that violated the single subject provision that we have in our Constitution, so did the tax bill. The tax bill also included an education provision. Neither one got at what the need was for Minnesotans. The tax bill overwhelmingly, 7 times more, helped corporations than it did working families. And I don't support that. My priority are working families in my district, and this bill really helped corporations. And we have to, what upsets me the most is that it puts uncertainty in for Minnesotans on how they're going to file their taxes next year. So I'm hoping, we're able to do something, in the beginning of next year to help before people start filing their taxes, because it is important. There were parts of that tax bill I supported, the 179 section that helped farmers and small businesses. That was a big, bipartisan supported provision. But at the end of the day, we need to send these as standalones, and we can't mix education and tax together. And the education provision that was included in that tax bill raided the professional development fund of teachers and really didn't put new money into education funding. You can't have shell games and shifts and gimmicks when we just got back into fiscal stability under Governor Dayton's leadership. So we need to maintain that. And the tax bill also, if it had been signed into law, would have put us into sure deficit in the coming years, which again is not something I'm interested in doing for Minnesotans. Well, this interim, I'm going to be very busy visiting businesses and schools and organizations and talking to constituents and learning about their needs and really building relationships to be the best state senator for Senate District 54.
Do you solemnly swear to support the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of Minnesota, and to discharge faithfully your duties as a senator to the best of your judgment and ability, so help you God?
I do.
Congratulations, Senator.
Thank you. Thank you.